On March 11, 2011, the northeastern region of Japan was hit by a massive tsunami and over 200,000 people lost their lives. This event was monumental to say the least, and it made worldwide news at the time. People in that region of Japan that day never predicted that tsunami would hit. They felt the earthquake, and even still, they did not even think that the tsunami would soon be coming. Today, we are going to be talking about the very strange events that began occurring after the tsunami hit Japan. Specifically, we are going to be diving in to all of the stories of the Tsunami Spirits. Now, this topic was actually covered by Netflix's series Unsolved Mysteries, okay? It's episode 3, which is called Tsunami Spirits, and it is absolutely mind-blowing, guys. These stories are so unexplainable, it is just insane. So we are going to dive into all of the stories. I'm going to tell you kind of my thoughts and my theories that I had while I was watching it, and you guys can let me know what you all think as well, especially if you maybe perhaps have a unique view that you are from Japan or you're more familiar with Japanese culture, because I think that that's very, very relevant when we're talking about today's story, which we're going to get into a little bit later. Before I go into the story, I just want to say welcome to my channel, Life from Mars. I'm so glad to have you guys here. My name is Marissa. Nice to meet you. If you're a returning subscriber, well, welcome back. But if you are new here, or if you've only been here a couple of times, I would absolutely love if you did hit that subscribe button. It really means a lot to me. I absolutely love making videos. I'm so passionate about it, and I make videos about all sorts of things, not just mysteries, but I do have quite a few of that. So if you're into that, make sure you go watch my other videos and hit that subscribe button. Thank you. I also made another video about episode 1, which is the Washington insider murder, the story of Jack John Wheeler. So if you guys did watch that episode as well, or if you're interested, I will link that above so that you can also watch that. That was episode 1 of Unsolved Mysteries. I'm planning on making a video for every single episode in that series, so stay tuned for that. So that being said, guys, let's get into talking about this absolutely insane phenomena, this crazy episode that Netflix put out about the Tsunami Spirits. So the show starts off right off the bat with an insane story that really just kind of ropes you in on everything that is yet to come. So the story actually opens up by introducing us to a reverend who's actually been a monk and a spiritual leader in this community, in this town in Japan that specifically was hit the worst by the tsunami. So basically, he describes this conversation that he had with this man that he saw, and he asked him, "Who are you?" And the guy replied to him, "I am at the bottom of the ocean." And he asked him, "Am I alive or dead?" And so he told him, there was a tsunami, an earthquake, and you are dead. You are at the bottom of the ocean. So that story pretty much lays the foundation for everything that we're about to get into, guys. So I'm talking spirits that are wandering, lingering after the tsunami, just very unknown and just insane and intriguing circumstances that happened after the tsunami. And it seems that it was specific to this incident and this area of the world, because there have not been many similar stories from other tsunamis. So the town that was actually hit where the Reverend lives is called Ishinomaki. By the way, I just want to apologize ahead of time if I'm pronouncing any of these things wrong. I am hoping I'm doing okay, because I did have the Netflix show as reference. So assuming that they did it right, I'm hoping that I'll get these names right. But the city that we are specifically talking about today is Ishinomaki. So when they're talking about this town, they begin by talking about how much the residents used to love the ocean before the tsunami hit. I mean, these were people that lived right on the coast. They lived off the water, essentially. A lot of people made their careers, made their livings off the ocean and the local waterways. I mean, you can imagine when these people have been living there probably for generations, or, even just being in any town or city, when you're close to the water, you do have a deep spiritual connection with it. So that same spiritual connection to the nature would obviously later translate into these strange events, or at least that's what I believe. So Ishinomaki actually had a history of earthquakes previous to the earthquake that triggered the tsunami on March 11, 2011. So on that day in 2011, prior to the tsunami, Ishinomaki was actually hit with a 9.0 magnitude earthquake, okay? And if you guys know anything about earthquakes, or the Richter scale of earthquake magnitudes, you know that that is an extremely large earthquake. I mean, that is pretty much almost the strongest earthquake that you can possibly have. So they have this massive earthquake, and luckily they were actually pretty well prepared to handle the earthquake because, like I said, they had already been dealing with earthquakes in the past. And after the earthquake, there actually was a tsunami warning that was issued, but nobody would anticipate the magnitude of the tsunami that actually would come. But of course, that tsunami did come, guys, and it is horrifying just seeing the footage and watching as people are just swept away in these huge, fast, terrifying waves that just came in and started destroying the city. And over time, these waves are just gaining more strength and growing even larger and larger. At its maximum height, the tsunami was actually 131 feet high, guys. Okay, so just imagine that. Imagine what a wave that's 131 feet tall. Just imagine what kind of damage that could do on a coastal city, all right? So that just gives you kind of an idea of how horrifying and destructive this tsunami really was. Guys, and honestly, the videos that they show, if you watched it at all, you know what I'm talking about, but even if you didn't, the videos and images of people running away from the tsunami, it is just heartbreaking, and it's honestly hard to watch. These waves are just coming in and they're so fast and they're so strong, you know, and there's videos of just people frantically running away and running uphill and, you know, just trying to get to higher ground so that they can somehow outrun this water. And meanwhile, these waves are just sweeping away cars. They're completely destroying homes, buildings, completely just sweeping away all of the infrastructure, you know, like everything that was just there a couple of moments ago. Some of the survivors of this incident even talked about how they were inside buildings, you know, like they were in an office building or they were just at work or they were in different places. And all of a sudden, this building just gets cracked open and they were outside and they didn't know what was going on. And of course, these people also would say that, I mean, they thought that they were going to die. And obviously, unfortunately, a lot of people did die. I mean, it was kind of inevitable in a way, you know, and it's so sad because very few people were lucky enough to survive with their life, especially the people that were the closest to the shore that day. And on top of that, guys, as if that was not tragic and bad enough, that was just compounded by the fact that right after the tsunami hit, all right, I mean, the city has just been wiped away. Everyone is in shock. There's so many people that need help and that are struggling for life. So many people have already lost their lives. And it then began snowing, okay? It was snowing very, very hard immediately after the tsunami. Mother Nature was just really not doing Ishinomaki any favors, all right? And so unfortunately, it did start snowing right after that horrible tsunami hit. So that just really made everything worse because now you have these people who are survived and not only are they drenched, but now they're being snowed on, right? Like they're at risk for hypothermia and other things. So you have the snow falling on all these people who are injured or, you know, have just narrowly survived or maybe were clinging to life. And it also, of course, hampered search and rescue efforts. And I'm sure that I don't have to tell you this, but obviously the show does describe how this was just absolutely horrific and super traumatic for the survivors and other people who were in the city, you know. I mean, it was so sad seeing people, you know, talk about losing their children, their sons, their daughters, their parents, you know, their coworkers, their neighbors, like people that they knew and they loved and that they cared about were just now gone. And in some cases, you know, a lot of these people lost multiple family members. There was just so many heartbreaking stories that were shared. And obviously, that was highly, highly traumatic for the people in Ishinomaki. So just some of the examples of the stories that people actually reported, some of the survivors. One man described that he had lost 54 of his coworkers, okay? 54. Can you imagine? Horrifying, all right? And another man describes losing both of his daughters. And he describes finding their bodies and having to identify his daughter who has been killed. And Guys, like, it is just so sad. It's so sad. So the city now has all of these people who have perished. They have all of these dead bodies, right? And they have all of this rubble and just chaos in the city. And on top of that, obviously, because the infrastructure was so badly damaged, they did not have electricity for quite some time. And so because they did not have electricity, they were also unable to have proper funerals for these people. So this same reverend from the beginning who kind of opened us into the story, and by the way, guys, I just want to say that although it did call him a reverend in the Netflix documentary, I don't know if that's necessarily the correct term to refer to him as. He did mention that he studied as a monk, and I do know that he was sort of the spiritual leader of this church or this temple where he was the leader, where he was residing and where he did his spiritual work. So I'm not exactly sure if, let's just say, an actual Japanese person or a person in this city would necessarily refer to him as a reverend. I honestly did think that was kind of like weird. I don't know, maybe it is. Maybe that is like the translation into English, but regardless, this man was a monk and he was a spiritual teacher, and the same man that in the beginning told the story of, meeting this man who said that he was at the bottom of the ocean. So we come back to this guy several times, and he's going to go on to tell a lot more stories as the show goes on. So he basically goes on to explain that traditionally people in Japan are cremated, and that this is something that's very, very important to their culture. It's just traditional to cremate people. So unfortunately, obviously, because they did not have electricity, they could not use the crematorium, and so people were not able to be cremated immediately. So basically, they didn't feel like they had any other option other than to just start burying people. So they ended up burying a lot of the dead and then later dug them back up so that they could be cremated once they gained electricity again. The Reverend basically just describes that there were so many bodies. I mean, just bodies of all ages, all sorts of different people. And he even said that he couldn't even read the mantras that he was trying to say, right? He's trying to do these mantras, these prayers for these people. He's a spiritual leader trying to give some comfort to his community. And he can't even actually finish reading these mantras because he was just shaking. He was just shaking uncontrollably because he was so overwhelmed. Obviously, it was very traumatic for him too. And so he describes, I couldn't even finish the mantras because I was just shaking so much. So at this point, we do learn a little bit more about the Reverend. So he describes that he is a 26th generation monk. And honestly, I just want to say that that's amazing. Like, wow, that is just so beautiful to me. And I was not even really aware, to be completely honest, that something like that, being a monk, was something that was running in families and that was generational. But it does make sense, and I just respect that so much, and I just thought that was so amazing. So at this point, obviously, he's taken over the same temple, right, that has been, I guess, led by his family for 26 generations. And so now it is his generation, and it is his time to lead this temple. And he talks about how he grew up in this temple, and obviously he did train as a monk, but he said that nothing that he had experienced before could have prepared him for what happened after the tsunami. So at this point, another person is actually introduced, which is Suji Akuno, and he is actually a journalist. So he describes that he actually came to the area in June. Okay, so remember, this tsunami originally took place on March 11th, and so he arrives there in June, and pretty much immediately he began hearing rumors about ghosts. And he said that by the time that October rolled around, he had heard so many different stories. In fact, this was becoming so prominent, and he was just getting so many different stories from so many different people about their ghost encounters that he actually started compiling all the stories, and he would actually do this through 2013. Okay, so he pretty much spent 2 straight years just collecting all of these different sightings and experiences that these people had had, supernatural, paranormal experiences. So the first story that we hear comes from a man named Endo. So Endo said that on the day of the earthquake, he went to a shelter to look for his mother. And at the shelter, they told him just to wait, and so he did. He just decided to, just wait there and see hope that his mother would arrive. So basically, at a certain point, he decides that he's just gonna kind of walk around and, try to see if he maybe sees his mother anywhere. And so he's walking around and he passes by this room and he sees this elderly woman looking out the window, and he notices that this woman, although she's turned away, she's wearing his mother's clothes. And so naturally, of course, he thinks, oh my God, this is my mother. She is here. So he goes up to her. He sees that it is his mother. And so he decides to take out his camera and he says, you know what, I'm going to take a picture of her so that I can send this to the rest of our family and let them know that, I found her and that she's okay. And so he gets out his camera and he basically says that as soon as he's about to take the picture, the face of this woman changes. And he suddenly realizes it's a stranger's face, that it's not his mother anymore, and that it never was his mother, supposedly. So this man would later find out that his mother was actually in a little microbus, basically this little microbus that was used as public transportation, and that it was swept away by the tsunami at pretty much the same time that he took that picture in the shelter. And this man stands by this experience. He knows that he saw his mother. He saw that lady wearing his mother's clothes, and that for a moment it was his mother. He can't explain it, but he knows that it happened. In general, the people of Ishinomaki are basically described by this journalist and by the Reverend and these other people as just being desperate. They were just desperate to find their loved ones, right? And they wanted some sort of message from them. They wanted to find them, or at least hear from them in some way, because they were just ripped away from them so fast. So a lot of people think that this may have possibly been somehow related to the fact that all of these people started seeing their loved ones and other ghosts. So the second major story that we hear is a woman who actually lost her 3-year-old son in the tsunami. This woman is described as just really struggling after her son's death. She would have panic attacks and she was depressed, and she actually still had her son's toys in her home. So she tells this story that one night, one of his toys turned on randomly. Now, apparently, this toy had a manual switch, and that there was absolutely no way that it could have turned on by itself. So this woman and her family, they were just completely taken aback by this. And the woman actually says that this event is what gave her her purpose back. It was basically a message to her that her son was always with her, and that he was always looking out for her, and that she was meant to be living her life, and that she was meant to have survived, and that she did have this important purpose, and that her son would always be there by her side. But not all people that saw ghosts or had paranormal experiences actually saw people that they knew or loved ones. A lot of people had experiences with these ghosts that were just completely random people, and in some cases they didn't even know they were ghosts at first. An example of a random encounter that happened was this one woman that they discussed, who was basically just in her house one night and she's prepping a meal, she's making dinner, and it was a clear night, okay? It's a nice day outside, and someone knocks at her door, this visitor, right? And they knock on her door, and this person at the door is soaking wet. Their entire hair, all of their clothes, their just whole thing, their whole essence is just soaking wet, okay? And remind you one more time, this is a clear night, okay? They're not just showing up in the rain. It wasn't raining earlier that day. No, this is a completely normal, dry, good night as far as weather is concerned, okay? And this person just shows up at the door soaking wet. So this woman, she's just kind of okay, well, I think I might know what this is, right? And the person at the door just asks for dry clothes. And so the woman, she goes and she gets the dry clothes and she gives them to them, and they walk away. And that was the whole encounter, right? But some of the encounters really are that insignificant, but still just insane. Basically, another big issue that is discussed when it comes to this ghost is that there was kind of this theory that the spirits didn't know where to go. So a lot of them were just lost and they were wandering, because keep in mind, so much of the city has been destroyed, okay? So it's if you're a spirit and you're just wandering and maybe you're trying to find your family or your belongings or your home or whatever it is, and you cannot find it because it's now just been completely obliterated, I think that it would make sense that you would have these spirits that are just kind of wandering, very confused. They actually also talked to one woman who is actually a medium. So in other words, she's someone that can see and communicate with deceased people, and that this is something that she's actually been able to do since she was a child. So she says that she would see these ghosts all the time, and that she was pretty much routinely having to like interact with ghosts and let them know, hi, you know, you're dead, there was a tsunami, something happened. Because something that kind of just seems to string through all of these cases is that these ghosts did not know that they were deceased. Now, you could maybe say, I mean, at least my theory at least is, okay, maybe these souls, these spirits, whatever, it was just such a sudden, intense, traumatic event that they didn't even have time to process, right? That they were about to be killed. And so maybe for some of these people, it really was just sort of like they didn't even know what happened. So that being said, this woman, this medium, she tells this story of she's driving home one night and she sees a group of men that are on the side of the street and that they were killed by the tsunami. Like, she knew. She said that they didn't really seem like they knew that they were dead. They were just kind of walking around and they're kind of trying to get her attention. And she sees them and she says, you know what, I think I have to stop because I know what they are. You know, this is someone who's familiar with seeing dead people, right? So she knows. This woman like intuitively knows way more than, let's just say, the average person there who would mistake them for a normal person. So she sees these ghosts, she sees this group of young men who she knows was killed by the tsunami. Again, like, they depict them as being wet, and you know, it's just kind of very obvious that these people are not just ordinary people and that there's something off here. So she stops and she kind of asks them, you know, what's going on? Are you guys okay? And so they start asking her what happened. And, you know, one man even says that he was lost and that he just wanted to go home. So again, like, you know, maybe he could not find his home any longer. So she says that she just knew that she had to tell them the truth, that she honestly felt bad for them, and that she explained to them, you know, I'm sorry, but something happened and you were all dead. So let's talk a little bit about why this might be happening, okay? And obviously this is the biggest question, and there's kind of two main arguments. I guess you could say there's the people that believe it and kind of their reasoning and their explanation for these ghosts, and there's kind of the other side where the skeptics lie, and I guess you could say the more psychological approach of trying to kind of explain why people could be having these experiences from a strictly psychological approach, right? In other words, as a result of the trauma that they've experienced instead of an actual genuine supernatural paranormal experience, right? So let's talk about both sides that are presented in this show. They do really kind of get both perspectives. So as far as spirituality is concerned, it's very important to understand, and this is very emphasized in the show, okay? Allegedly, Japanese spirituality does not separate the living and the dead. The way that they compare it is they basically say death is like a thin sliding door between the living and the dead. And so you can see the other side through that door, right? And it can be opened and closed. It's just kind of like a small barrier, but they believe that they're still existing in the same realms, right? So there is really no difference between the living and the dead, as opposed to where, you know, maybe in more Western societies, they would see it as very, very separate, right? Once someone's dead, it's like very over, right? You're never going to have another interaction with that soul, whatever. In Japanese spirituality, that is not the case whatsoever. And that being said, it is also mentioned that a lot of people do not ever seek any counseling or any actual psychological help about dealing with death, especially related to the actual tsunami. A lot of these people, these survivors, they had all this trauma, right? And obviously they had a lot of issues spanning from that, but they did not actually want to get therapy because they feared that if they forgot the dead or if they stopped mourning the dead, that would basically make them actually disappear. And so in order to keep them alive and their memories alive, they had to just, you know, deal with missing them and deal with being depressed and deal with all these emotions, because they felt that by doing that, they were directly keeping them alive, even though they were dead, if that makes sense. So I am going to talk about this a little bit more in a second, and we're going to dive a little bit deeper on how this is even kind of related specifically to this city, right? Because that is also relevant. But first, I want to talk briefly about kind of the other side, right? Which is the psychological sort of skeptic, more science-based, I guess you could say, approach to explaining this phenomena. So in order to do that, they actually introduced this other man, and his name is actually Kiyoshi Kanebshi. I do not want to mispronounce it, so I had to look at it. Kiyoshi Kanebshi. I had to look at my notes, guys. So this man actually has his PhD with a specialty in the sociology of disasters. Okay, so this is pretty much literally this guy's complete field of research, all right, is studying the people and what happens when you have these disasters. So this man, he does obviously describe his kind of hesitance to believe these ghost stories, and you know, he himself is not necessarily someone that really believes in these things, but he did say that when he was doing his research, obviously again, like this is his main field of research, is doing sociology of disasters, so naturally this man is studying this region, he's studying these people and the aftermath, and of course because he's doing that, he does hear about these ghost stories. So he basically says that again, he starts to compile stories as well, and he's kind of gathering evidence and gathering reports and sightings and things that people had experienced. And he describes that what he thought was the most credible were the encounters that actually had physical evidence, okay? And this is where it gets very interesting because yes, even if you want to be the biggest skeptic in the world, and this man basically even says this along these lines of, you know, you cannot fight physical evidence, because if there's physical evidence, then you know that something happened. Maybe you can't explain what, right, or why, but you know that something happened. So basically, all these stories that he had gathered that actually had physical evidence were involving taxi drivers, okay? So basically, it was people that were taxi drivers that were picking up ghosts and, you know, running the meter and taking them somewhere only for them to disappear or, you know, just randomly vanish or whatever have you. There's various different stories. So the first story is of this man who is a taxi driver, and it is 164 days after the tsunami, all right? That's what they describe. And at this point in the season, it is actually very warm, okay? So it's very hot on this day in Japan. So this taxi driver pulls over for this 20-year-old man, and this man is wearing a thick jacket, okay? So he's wearing this thick coat, and keep in mind it's really hot outside, right? It's like the middle of the summer, and so it doesn't really make much sense that this man is wearing the heavy coat, but obviously, you know, the taxi driver's not gonna really question him, so he just lets him in the car. He notices that, thinks it's a little bit strange, but regardless, you know, it's just another fare, right? So the guy gets in the car. So the entire way, he was just getting this really weird feeling, the taxi driver. And on top of the fact that he was already weirded out by his coat, he just felt like something was wrong. And so finally, they're about to get to the destination, right? And they're literally pulling up. And the entire time, he knew that the guy was there. And he pulls up finally to the destination. And he turns around, he looks into the back seat, and he realizes that the guy is gone, all right? And you know that if you have somebody in your car, you know that there's no way for them to get out of your car unless they literally jump out of the car, which obviously he would have noticed, assumingly, right? I don't know how the door is gonna get back closed if the guy jumped out, right? And obviously the only other way for him to escape were to be if he had stopped. And obviously that's not the case, because once again, this is a taxi service, right? So you are taking somebody from one location to another. There's no stops. No one is getting out at any point. So it makes absolutely no sense logically, right? Assuming that this would be a normal man, of how he would have gotten out of the car. So several taxi drivers had similar experiences to this. They basically talked about how, yeah, they were literally taxiing around ghosts. And obviously the physical proof of this is the meters, right? The actual fares that were like logged into their meters, the system of I turned it on at this point, I turned it off at that point. And these taxi drivers were so sweet. And again, like, you know, they have this connection with death, right? And the people that are dead. And so they would even say like, it's no problem. He actually ended up finding out that the taxi drivers were literally paying these meters out of pocket, right? Because what do you do when you just drove someone maybe 10, 15, 20 miles and they disappeared, right? You find out it's a ghost. Who's gonna pay the fare, right? So these taxi drivers, poor things, they're having to pay it themselves. They're having to pay their own fare out of pocket because they keep picking up freaking ghosts in their taxis. And it's so funny because again, they have this really strong connection with the dead, right? And so these taxi drivers did not even mind this, all right? They were literally saying like, it's no problem, we will keep picking them up and we will keep taking them to where they need to go. It is something we're happy to do, right? It is like they want to be of service to these people who are dead. These people obviously had also lost loved ones, you know, and so it's described that they literally welcome these ghosts with open arms. So even despite this evidence and the fact that he did get this real physical evidence from these taxi drivers, and he did admittedly find these stories very, very compelling, he says that he actually did not really believe that they were really ghosts. He thinks that the ghosts were a way for these people to deal with their trauma, and that maybe the fact that they did believe in these ghosts so strongly, or they did believe in the dead so strongly, is kind of what manifested, I guess you could say, these hallucinations for these people. But obviously there's several issues with that, or I guess questions that could be raised as far as, okay, first of all, why does this not happen in other areas of the world, right? Why did this not happen at any other huge natural disasters or tsunamis or other events? Why were people not seeing their loved ones, your ghosts, at that time or in those locations? And on top of that, why was it happening to so many people, right? And why were people having such similar experiences when a lot of the times these people did not even know each other? So it's like things like that can't necessarily be explained away so simply. And of course, the Reverend, he says that skepticism, or people that just chalk up the sightings to PTSD or trauma, that does not invalidate or change the perspective of the survivors who know and still believe, himself included, that those were ghosts, that those were spirits, and that regardless of the skepticism, it kind of doesn't change their experience, right? And obviously that is true. And he also explains a little bit more that this specific region of Japan that was hit is still a very rural area in a lot of places. It's not necessarily as industrialized as other areas in Japan. And so a lot of people still have very traditional beliefs. And that in that specific region of Japan is where people most have this sort of idea about death, right? And this super close connection between life and death. So in my opinion, I think that this is one of the most important things about this case, about this mystery, is that this specific region, honestly, what I personally believe is that I think that these people had the door open to these ghosts, right? So let's just say that in my opinion, right, again, this is just all skepticism, and I cannot personally speak for the survivors, but the impression that I was getting from these stories and from learning about this culture and learning about their beliefs and all of this, I personally do not think that it is something they're making up. I do think that these ghosts were real. And can I explain why they were there or how? Obviously not, but I do think that they were. And I would say that I think that so many people saw these ghosts and so many people had these experiences with these tsunami victims because they already had that door open to that spiritual ability to interact with the dead, right? So in a normal circumstance, perhaps only that medium woman would have had an experience, right? It's like in a normal city where no one believes that they could possibly communicate to the dead, I think that they probably wouldn't, right? I mean, it's kind of like any other psychic ability. In my opinion, I think that anyone can have a psychic ability, but they just need to really admit that they have it and actually develop it and believe in it fully. And I think that when you believe in something fully like that, that is when you're opening the door to actually being able to experience these things, because I think that perhaps those same ghosts could have been there, but if those people were not as open-minded to it, they may not have actually been able to experience it. Now, again, maybe that's just me speculating and maybe that's completely incorrect, but that is the main thing that I was getting from it, is I think that because these people had such a strong connection with the living and the dead, and they saw it as such a thin veil, and they really did think that it was kind of on the same plane, that this specific event just really was the perfect scenario for these ghosts to be able to be seen, or these entities, these spirits. I also do want to say that I think that it also makes sense because from what I've seen in the research that I've done in the past and the things that I have seen about ghosts, or even, people who have reincarnated, let's just say, that have stories of being a ghost in a past life. Various, I guess you could say, sources about possible explanations for ghosts. A big thing that I have seen over and over, and I've also seen this from mediums as well that have reported this. We're talking very reputable people, reputable mediums that have worked in this for many, many years. I have heard several times that ghosts are more likely to manifest or more likely to appear when they have died in some sort of trauma, specifically if it is a sudden trauma, right? And what is more a case of a sudden trauma than a massive unexpected tsunami, right? I mean, it almost seems that if that is the case, that if ghosts are more likely to be produced, I guess, or let's just say a soul is more likely to lurk a little bit longer or linger on earth a little bit longer when they die under these circumstances, well, it only makes sense that you would have tons of ghosts when 20,000 people are killed suddenly under these circumstances, right? And perhaps even those people's beliefs about life and death, and the fact that there was no difference, maybe that is even what kept them there, and that is what made them into ghosts, because their own souls and their own, I guess, brains, however you want to describe it, their spirit, I guess, a bit more, was actually what propelled them to become a ghost in the first place. Now, again, this is all just speculation, but that is what I was thinking, honestly, when I was watching this and learning about this specific part. So the last story that they dive into is actually a little bit different. So this story is of a young woman who actually came knocking on this reverend's door, on the temple door, and she was there at night, and she said that she really needed help and that she needed to see the reverend. According to the reverend and his wife, this woman looked very ill, It was very obvious that something was wrong with her, and she told the reverend, "I feel many people inside me and I can't stop them. Please help me." So the Reverend basically said that, in a sense, this woman was possessed. Okay, so she was basically describing that she had a bunch of different spirits that had possessed her body and that were just essentially driving her crazy. And, it was just extremely overwhelming. And the Reverend literally says that he had never seen someone suffer as much as she did. And to this day, he still never has. Okay, so this woman is supposedly, literally possessed by a bunch of these spirits, and she is just suffering so much, and she's just so desperate to get these spirits exorcised from her body, right, to return back to being just conscious herself in her body. So they describe how this woman would come in all the time, pretty much every single day. The Reverend had to work with her so much, and just doing different things. And he even describes how he wanted to even help her beyond even just spiritual means, right? Because he felt like he even had to do more for her, even just beyond his spiritual teachings, because he just felt like she needs something, like, I need to help her, And so he was even kind of diverting from the normal ceremonies or just normal mantras and like burning of incense and different things that they would typically do. And at one point, this woman, who was actually named Amy, she asked the Reverend if he thought that she was mentally ill, right? Because obviously, you can imagine if you're hearing all these voices in your head, and that's not exactly how it's described, but when you're describing that you're possessed by all of these other, I guess, personalities or entities or individuals, she was concerned. She thought, am I just having a mental break? And so she asked him honestly, do you think that I'm mentally ill? Like, do you think that that is what is wrong with me? And he told her, honestly, no, I don't. I don't think that you're mentally ill. I think that there's something else going on here. I do think that you were possessed by these spirits, and I don't think you're mentally ill, but I do think that you're more sensitive than most people, and that because you were so sensitive, these spirits were able to latch onto you and kind of prey on you because you were a little bit more vulnerable to this. And he also told her that when big disasters happen like this, the people's ranges get expanded, okay? So even if, basically he describes that even if necessarily you weren't as sensitive before, because this happened, your range of sensitivity increased, okay? And so again, this can be linked back to what I already kind of talked about, right? Like, if all of these people, supposedly their ranges of their psychic abilities or their sensitivities to the supernatural, paranormal, or, I guess you could say spirit world, if that increased, again, that would only explain even more why so many people were having these experiences. So this woman, Amy, she says that at first she did not even know what was happening to her. The only thing that she knew was that she was in extreme pain, and she even admitted that she literally felt like she wanted to die because she was just in so much extreme pain and just overwhelmed, and she had no idea what was happening to her. She was saying that she could feel the spirit of a little girl who was crying, and that this little girl was holding onto her leg, and that it was squeezing her leg, and that it wouldn't let go. And there was another man inside her that was screaming at the Reverend, and she was basically just supposedly possessed, literally. Like all of these spirits had come into her body and were just overtaking her. After an extended period and a long time of many days and many times that she would show up, you know, a lot of mantras, a lot of prayer and incense burning, all of that, she was eventually able to be exorcised from her possession. So the Reverend says that he had never seen any kind of possession ever like this, that this woman's personality would literally completely change depending on who was kind of taking possession of her, I guess you could say, like which spirit was coming forward in that moment. And honestly, one of the most interesting things about this woman specifically is that she actually had nothing to do with the tsunami, okay? Like this woman lived kind of farther inland, and so she did not lose anybody in the tsunami. Like she did not lose her family members. She was not like all these other people that had extreme PTSD and like trauma from losing family members and stuff. Like she had nothing to do with the tsunami, okay? But she did say that she had been kind of dealing with ghosts all her life. Like she'd always seen them. They'd always kind of like, you know, been involved with her, but she was not at all like related to the actual tsunami. So she says that about a year after the tsunami though, that is when the tsunami ghost started just really kind of bothering her and just invading her life. So at this point, obviously, she's in extreme pain. She feels like she's being possessed. She feels like she's experiencing all of these crazy things. And that's why she decides to go to the Reverend. And it was nonstop. Like she would go to him all the time, many days a week. And sometimes, you know, she would show up at 7 p.m. and not leave till 2 or 3 in the morning, right? Because she just is like being tortured by all these various spirits. And so she just has to keep going in and going in to, you know, get the Reverend to somehow help her. And guys, like the experiences that this woman was having, crazy. Okay, so basically whenever one of these ghosts or spirits would like come forward into her consciousness, like take possession of her, they were all fighting for it, you know, so they were all kind of switching off. But whenever one would come forward, it would basically like go through its story of their tsunami death, and she would literally feel it all. She would see it, she would experience it. Like she was literally like, it was like she was being immersed. Like it was like she was that person, and she would just see it all unfold and feel it, and like it was like she was there. One of the stories that she tells that's so heartbreaking is of a little girl. So this little girl basically came forward into her consciousness and describes what happened to her during the tsunami. So this little girl was actually holding her brother's hand during the tsunami, and she had to let it go because they got separated. At the time, her and her brother were running from the tsunami, right? Like they're with all these other people just trying to run away and run uphill. And so she's holding her brother's hand, and they've been running. And her brother tells her, I can't run anymore. And she just didn't even reply. She didn't even look at him because she knew that if they stopped running, they would die. Like they could not stop running. And so she doesn't even respond to him. She just keeps running. And this woman, Amy, like she describes literally being able to feel the touch of that little girl's brother's hand, you know, like she could feel him holding her hand. Obviously, she said that this little girl was very afraid, that she saw her brother being washed away, and she's just terrified, you know, because she knows like what's coming for her, and that she's just seen her brother being washed away. So at this point, like the Reverend is trying to exorcise this little girl, right? So he reaches out and he tries to hold her hand, you know, like maybe that will help her. You know, she was holding her little brother's hand. Maybe I can hold her hand and that will help her. And so for a moment, you know, she holds his hand, but then she just lets go and she says no, right? She's like, no. Like she realizes like this is not right. And so she just starts saying like, I want mom, right? This little girl, you know, all she wants is her mom. You know, she's so scared and playing out this trauma and this horrible situation that ultimately led to her and her brother's death. And all she's saying is, I just want my mom. She said that she wanted to apologize to her because she felt like she had to say sorry for letting go of her brother. Like, all she wanted was to tell her mom that she was sorry, that she had let him go. So at this point, the Reverend's wife actually steps in. And so she thinks, I think that I can pretend to be her mother, or, maybe I can play this part for her. So she goes up to Amy and, who is this little girl at this point, right? Being possessed by this little girl. She holds her hand and she starts, just hugging her and holding her. And she tells her that it's okay and that she's there and that she's always with her. And she just starts comforting her, trying to make her feel better. And this is really starting to help. She's really starting to feel comforted by this. And she tells her to, go towards the light. And she just starts kind of guiding her and saying, let go towards the light. Everyone is waiting there for you. Your brother is there. You have to go towards the light. And so eventually, after a while of doing this, it does work. And, Amy comes back too. And they were able to get this little girl out of her. And so, yes, like I mentioned, eventually, this Reverend was able to really help Amy and really get these spirits to leave her alone. And, at this point, it's been almost 10 years since the tsunami. And so things have calmed down. And some of these spirits have, departed, or I guess gone to the other side, or gone to the light, or whatever you want to say. But people do still have experiences. And the Reverend, he's just such a lovely man, this monk, and you can just tell how much he really truly loves and cares for his community. And even though he's also a victim in this and also has had to deal with an immense amount of PTSD and trauma and hardship from the tsunami, he is really still doing all that he can to help his citizens and to help the people in his city cope, and also help them cope with the fact that they're dealing with these supernatural experiences on top of just the regular trauma, right? You have to stack on all of these ghosts and things like that. He is actually quoted as saying, and I loved this, that what we can do is listen to people to try to ease their pain. And, sometimes that's all a person needs. And especially talking to a spiritual leader, obviously that's so comforting for people. And so I think that it's really amazing what that man is doing. I really did admire him. He also says that a lot of the survivors that would come to him about these ghost stories were actually very afraid of the ghosts, and they didn't really know what to think about it. Some of these people have never had a supernatural or paranormal experience, so they were naturally kind of afraid and freaked out, and they're thinking, oh my God, I'm seeing a ghost, or I saw a ghost, or, I had a strange experience, or what have you. And he says that he tells them that they're not scary. He tells them that they should not be afraid, and that they appear in front of you because they worry for you and that they long for you, and that it is nothing scary, and that it's just something that, you can just deal with and accept, and that it's nothing negative to have this experience. And he basically just tells them, to do exactly what he's been doing, and exactly what the medium had done, is just, talk to them and tell them, explain to them that they are dead and that they don't need to concern themselves with the living, that everything is okay, and that there is another place for them to go to, and that they should go to the other side, and that they should, again, go to this light, right? And so that's just basically what he tells people now, is that if you have these kinds of experiences, if you see a ghost, just tell them what's going on and help guide them towards the other side. All right, guys, so that is it. That is the Tsunami Spirits, the mystery of the 2011 Japanese tsunami spirits. Absolutely insane story, guys. I was really taken aback by this episode. I thought it was so incredible, so captivating, and so intriguing to hear about these stories. Again, right? There's so many different theories about what could have caused this. And I guess in the first place, it's kind of just, the first question is, do you really believe that these are ghosts or not? Right? And I would ask you guys this question. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. I'm sure you guys are going to have a lot of wonderful thoughts, because I know you did about the last episode. So I hope you feel the same way about this one. But I would love to hear what you guys think. Do you guys really think that these ghosts were real? In my opinion, I think, like I said, I think that they were. I think that there's plenty of evidence, and I think that when you have that many people having these different experiences, I think that there only is one way to explain it, and that it is happening. Now, again, do I think that it's more prevalent, probably specifically in this situation, because of where they are, because of the beliefs of the people there? 100%. I honestly do. I think that definitely intensified it. And maybe like the Reverend said, perhaps because of the trauma, these people's spiritual abilities were heightened. And honestly, that doesn't seem too off to me either. But again, I would love to hear what you guys think. You know, do you think that there's something else at play here? Maybe perhaps another reason why this would be happening to these people. I did want to say also that although they kind of said in the documentary or in the show that this kind of had never happened before, and they kind of posed the question of, well, why don't tsunami spirits exist at other locations? And it reminded me while I was watching this of this one thing that I saw about in Hawaii. Apparently, there is actually one specific location that I know of that has been hit by several tsunamis, and that area is actually regarded as haunted, or in the very least it's regarded as having, I guess you could say, entities and spirits and different things there because of the tsunamis and the trauma that has hit that area. So I immediately thought about that. And so if you guys know about that, if you are from Hawaii, you know about that situation, I would love to hear about it. Please leave a comment and explain that for us. Or if you are from a different area of the world where similar things have happened, I would love to hear about that as well, because I do not think that this is exclusive to Japan. I honestly don't. I think that this is definitely something that has happened before, and that I think it may even continue to happen. I think that it's less likely to happen in the Western world because, again, everyone kind of has that spiritual meter off, right? It's like they turn off the third eye, they turn off the medium abilities because they just don't believe that it's even possible. And so because no one believes that it's possible, they're automatically closing the door, right? Like, just like the Japanese people say that, you know, it's kind of like a thin sliding door that you can see through. I feel like Americans, let's say, or other like European countries perhaps, would look at it as like a steel door, right, that closes and that's it. You're on the other side and you throw away the key, right? Like there's no connection. At least that's what we're made to believe, right? And again, some people are naturally more sensitive. Do people have experiences here? Of course they do. They have them everywhere. And so I feel like just because people were more open to it, that's why so many people had those experiences. I think that they probably happen all the time when there's natural disasters or traumas. But again, that's just my opinion. I would love to hear what you guys have to say. If you know any other stories, if you know anything that's related to this, or even just anything else that you thought, right? Like, I would love to hear your theories. Maybe even if you have a legitimate theory about like how this could be psychologically explained. I mean, like I said, my biggest questions with that are, how do so many people have similar experiences that don't even know each other? Why are people having experiences that have real physical evidence? Like, let's just say the man trying to take a picture and then it's a different lady, or, you know, the taxi drivers that are driving people and they have to pay their own fares. I mean, I don't think that they would do that. Like, how else could you explain that, right? So if you have some sort of explanation, though, I'd absolutely love to hear it. Whatever your thoughts are, please leave them in the comments down below. I would love to talk to you guys about it. We can all talk and have this discussion, because ultimately, obviously, the whole thing with this and this whole series is that it's unsolved mysteries, right? There is not really an answer, and we probably never will have an answer. We'll probably only always have speculation and just possibilities and, you know, different, I guess, questions to be answered. So yeah, guys, I really enjoyed this episode of Unsolved Mysteries. I look forward to hearing your comments, and thank you so much for watching this video. I really, really appreciate it, and thank you for getting to the end. And if you did like this video, please make sure to just take one extra moment to give it a big like. I really appreciate it. It literally takes 1 second, and it literally makes me so happy. It makes a really big difference for me. It helps more people see my videos, and it also helps let me know what kind of videos you guys like. So if you tell me, we really like these mystery videos, we really like, you know, whatever, I know that I can make more of that. All right, so please, if you like this video, just give it a like. I'd really appreciate it. And of course, if you are not already subscribed, please hit that subscribe button, guys. I am trying to get to 1,000 right now. I am working on it. We are going to get there sooner rather than later, hopefully, because I'm hustling with these videos. I want to get as much content out there for you guys as possible, so I can feed all your little content needing needs. And I really love my subscribers so much. It really, really means the world to me for you to subscribe, and so I'd really appreciate it if you do that. And while you're at it, click the little bell so that you can get post notifications for every time that I do post a new video. So thank you all so much again for watching. I really, really, really appreciate it. I'm sending you all the good energy, and I look forward to hearing your thoughts in the comments down below. So that is it for today's video, and I will see you on the next one. Bye!